It really is sensible advice when people say you should never run away from your problems, except if those problems happen to be military trained assassins who will stop at nothing to kill you. In that case, I highly recommend that you run. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. And folks, I couldn't be happier to have a chat today with good old co-writer-director Edgar Wright and co-writer Michael Bacall, the creative team that is bringing you The Running Man. That's right, it's in theaters this week. I highly recommend you grab a pal and go see it because it's an awesome big screen experience. This was no easy task because Edgar and Michael were essentially going back to Stephen King's original novel for their adaptations, so they're world building. They're keeping the pace going. They're adding new things to Stephen King's novel, but with his blessing. And without a doubt, Edgar and Michael were very forthcoming about their creative process, so I know you'll dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig, folks, it's my 20th year of podcasting, my 13th year for Backstory Magazine. There's a lot going on for both of my outlets, and I hope you'll check them out. We keep adding new articles to Backstory issue 56, which you could read over at backstory.net. And issue 57 will be coming out soon in December. If you've never read us before, you could read us on a desktop or laptop at backstory.net or via our iPad app, Backstory. There's a free issue you could peruse, so I hope you check that out. And if you like what you see, and I hope that you do, I hope you'll consider supporting independent entertainment journalism and becoming a subscriber. And to sweeten the deal, I'm offering you a discount coupon code of SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5, and that will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see all these Zoomcasts. That's right, you could see us chatting. It would really mean a lot to me to have you support my passion projects, so thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our interview with co-writer-director Edgar Wright and co-writer Michael Bacall about their latest film, The Running Man, in theaters this week. Edgar, Michael, it's good to see you. How's it going, you guys? I loved your film.
Thank you very much. So glad you enjoyed it.
Look, I'm going to jump right into it. When did you both become aware that you wanted to be a screenwriter? Edgar, obviously, screenwriting is a means to an end for directing. And Michael, you, to my knowledge, haven't really directed a feature yet that I recall, but maybe one day you will. So I'm just curious when you realized growing up that you wanted to be a writer. Edgar, starting with you.
I mean, I guess when I started out making amateur movies, I was writing them, but I don't think in a kind of very serious, studied way. Like I wrote my first film, A Fistful of Fingers, but if I'm completely honest, I don't think I did a second draft, which probably is reflected in the quality of the movie. So I kind of thought sometimes maybe I should have done a second draft as well. It wasn't really until Shaun of the Dead, in working with Simon and Jess on Space, where I was script editing with them, but not writing, I felt more kind of confident about doing that. And with Shaun of the Dead, it means to an end is a weird way of saying, because I'm really, really proud of the script, but I think it was more you felt that you could do a better job of making the movie that you wanted to see by writing it yourself. It was as simple as that. I think me and Simon both realized that the perfect screenplay was never going to come through our letterbox. So it was really a thing of like, we should write it ourselves. But when we did write Shaun of the Dead, we did get really serious about it and read Sid Field and read a bunch of the other like screenwriting books and do all of the extracurricular exercises that are in those books. It was out of, like I said, a sort of a means to an end. It was more the case of understanding that nobody else is going to write your debut screenplay for you.
That makes sense. And speaking of Shaun of the Dead, we've known each other so long. That was the first time I interviewed you. It was right before the podcast had started. This is my 20th year of podcasting, if you could believe it. I remember Focus wouldn't pay for a theater for us to show the movie, so I had to scramble, and we did it at the UCLA Student Union, where there was literally folk like folding chairs, and I have a tape in a box somewhere of that interview. I've got to put it together and transcribe it one day because a podcast could never come from that tape. And the students were just going crazy, and I think it was like at the point when you were realizing, okay, I think this little British zombie movie is going to be a hit in America too. Michael, when did screenwriting enter your life? When did you realize that it was something that you really wanted to pursue?
I always wanted to write. I think in second or third grade, I wrote a short story for school called Ghost Mice, and I was heavily criticized for how much dialogue was in it. So
Nice.
I guess technically that's my first screenplay. And then I was putting myself through college, just doing small acting roles here and there. And I wanted to try screenwriting. So as soon as I graduated, I started working with a friend on my first screenplay, and then that turned into Manic, which was one of the first movies released in a theater shot on digital, Sony DV Cam. Our big problem back in the day was transferring from digital to film for the projectors.
That was a big problem. It still is kind of complicated in some cases when people need to do it, but there's very little need these days. Well, look, I want to get right into the Stephen King of all that is. This is quite a year for Stephen King. For anybody that hasn't been paying attention, this year Stephen King has released in theaters The Long Walk, The Life of Chuck, The Monkey, The Institute, Welcome to Derry on TV also, and of course your film The Running Man. And my question for both of you is, what was your first Stephen King book, your first Stephen King experience? Edgar, I know you've said that you read Running Man when you were 14. Was that your first Stephen King book?
No, I'm pretty sure my first Stephen King book was Night Shift, one of the short story compilations.
Yeah.
I definitely had Night Shift and Skeleton Crew, and I want to say Night Shift was the first, which is such a galaxy expanding selection of short stories. And so many of those short stories have been made into movies, sometimes taking the title only, cough, cough, The Lawnmower Man. Example A. So the ones I remember, I think I still have all the paperbacks I had because I had some and then I shared some with my brother. So I definitely had Night Shift, Skeleton Crew, Christine, Salem's Lot, It, the Bachman books, and then I think my brother had Pet Sematary and The Shining. So we sort of shared paperbacks.
That's awesome. Michael?
It was either It or The Shining, and I'm pretty sure I had to steal it from my friend's parents because I think that kind of thing might have been frowned upon in my house, and I had to keep it hidden.
That makes sense.
The ironic thing about reading Stephen King too young, which is exactly when you should start reading Stephen King, is that you read a Stephen King book because you want to read a horror book, and if you're interested in genre, the idea of reading the top horror author is really exciting. And then, of course, the stuff that your parents would really frown upon is everything else that's in the book. Because for me, it's probably I think of him as being a gateway author between children's books and adult books. The genius of Stephen King is his world building before the genre element kicks in.
Yeah.
And you really get to know the characters. You really get to know the world. The main setting is always very grounding and feels so vivid and real that you feel like these are real people that whatever is about to happen to. But of course, when I think about King, it's like my first immediate thought is not necessarily about the horror. It's about kind of learning about sex, relationships and adultery and all these other things, alcoholism, all these other things that are in the books that previously weren't necessarily in any books I'd read before.
This was one of the Bachman books that he wrote under his Richard Bachman pen name before he was Stephen King. And I had read in a few places that he wrote this in a week. And he said it was a dark time, and it's just so fascinating. The guy is just so absolutely prolific. The book is amazing, and we're going to get into the other film version, but just for reference points for other movies that have inspired you, there's this whole genre of movies about this most dangerous hunt, right? Starting with The Most Dangerous Game, based on the 1924 short story by Richard Connell, and that became the 1932 film. But these rich trophy hunters going after regular people was the concept, but there's also movies that go from Predator to Running Man to Hard Target. Battle Royale was also a book. Hunger Games, the whole series. Ready or Not, The Hunt, a little bit of Squid Game, of course, The Long Walk, and even to a small extent, I would say 1971's Punishment Park.
Yes, absolutely.
So it is a strange movie, even though it's more rioting and beating up than just killing. But Punishment Park is something that I've been thinking about lately, which it's hard to find, but you should still be able to find a DVD somewhere.
There's a really good Blu-ray. I think I want to say it's on Masters of Cinema. Also, Peter Watkins, the director of Punishment Park, just recently passed away, which is very sad. And so much of his career was making these Future Shocks. War Game, if you've ever seen that, is banned for years by the BBC because it was too disturbing. But I'd say there's others as well that even predate both. I mean, you've got Rollerball in the mid-70s.
Absolutely.
Before that, another big one based on a Robert Sheckley short story is the Italian film The 10th Victim by Eli Etri, which is based on a I forget the name of the short story, but that's a game show where the top assassins are trying to take each other out. So it's almost like a film where all of the characters are of the equivalent of Lee Pace's character in this, trying to bump each other off, which I think in a weird way, it's kind of sort of seems to predate John Wick. I've always wondered whether the John Wick films were inspired by The 10th Victim.
I've never even thought of it like that. That's incredible. Was there anything we missed, Michael, that you would throw in there?
I don't think so.
Death Race 2000, big one. Although there's a bunch of those. Death Race 2000, Death Game.
Yeah.
Death Sport. I think it's Death Sport or Death Race 2000. One of them features the only scene where Martin Scorsese and Sylvester Stallone share the screen as actors.
Really?
Yeah, for real. It's one of those too. Somebody listening to this pod is already screaming the title at the
yeah, exactly.
It's in Death Sport.
Everybody knows this, I think, but it's just so weird. I got to say it again, that this process for Running Man started essentially as a tweet in 2017 in which you said if you could remake anything, you would remake Running Man.
Maybe I was trying to manifest it, but yeah, like I'd read the book when I was 14 and I had read the book before I saw the 1987 version because that didn't come out into the UK until late 1988. It was an 18 certificate, so I couldn't see that at the cinema. I saw it on VHS a couple of years later, but by the time I saw it on VHS, I'd read the Richard Bachman book. And so it's probably the first time I was really aware that a film adaptation could be wildly different from the source. Right. I mean, they take very, very little from the book, and it's only really parts of the game show setup, who Ben Richards is, how the action plays out. So many of the characters are just not in the 1987 film. So it was always my feeling becoming a director, because you always get asked about these things, what would you like to remake? And the truth is we don't see our film as being a remake. We see it as being a new adaptation of the existing material. But when I got asked that question, it's usually in those junket things. It's like the second question you get asked after, would you ever do a Star Wars? Is that what would you remake if you had the opportunity? And I would say The Running Man because I believed there was another like great movie in that source material, basically. And before even that tweet, I had looked into the rights about 15 years ago and they weren't available. It was all complicated. But I'd said this in a couple of interviews. So I think it was 4 years ago, like probably right now, it was right after The Last Night in Soho came out, that Simon Kinberg emailed me and said, hey, and I've known Simon for years, but we've never actually done anything together. He said, do you have an interest? Is it true you have an interest in The Running Man? Because we have the rights. And I was like, yes. Let's talk. And it started like that. And then Michael was the second call I made once it was happening.
That's interesting that you called Michael because to an extent, there is a Scott Pilgrim Running Man connection. More so of the original movie, having these different bosses to battle on each level. So how did you know that Michael was the right man for the job?
Well, I'll tell you what, I want you to answer this question, MB, but I feel that most of the things that you've had produced are more in the comedy vein. And I knew, maybe because you've been working on other projects, that you had a huge interest in sci-fi and also just really great at doing this sort of socio-political stuff. It wasn't like there was anybody else on the list. I said, right. I know a fit to work on this. It's Michael Bacall. So I don't know, but you could speak to that better than me.
It was a good call to get. I hadn't read the book since I was a kid and reread it, and it blew my hair back. Felt a real connection with Ben Richards instantly. I've written a lot of action, but the comedy stuff is more so what's been produced. Edgar and I have talked about other genres, space westerns and the like. This came along at the perfect time. The book is so prescient and incendiary, and the first things we talked about were, can we make something that kind of follows the form of the book where you're in the character's POV front to back without it feeling repetitive? Can we stick to the basic rules of the game as they are in the book, which is that anyone can kill you at any time. You put your life in danger by trusting anyone. And so with those two things in mind, we kind of dove in, and a really exciting challenge. And I really love writing action, so plenty to dig into.
I am curious because it's clear from your trailer, and we're not getting into spoilers really in this podcast, but it's clear from the trailer that you did not emulate that concept of these kind of comic book styled. In the 87 movie, they're stalkers, but they would be part of the group in your team known as hunters. There were these crazy characters: Sub-Zero, Buzzsaw, Dynamo, Fireball, Captain Freedom. Was there ever even for a moment a thought of the concept of that being extended into this film, or was it because it just wasn't a part of the book that you knew it was going to be the first thing to go?
I think a bit of both. I think number one is that my favorite remakes, and if I am now saying it's a remake, so even if it was a remake of the original film, which it isn't, it's more like the book, think doing something different when new adaptation is always the way to go. Like my favorite, probably of them all, and the one that's probably the most different from the source material is David Cronenberg's The Fly.
Yeah.
I think the script by Charles Pogue, is that who wrote it? It's amazing because it kind of honors the first film and yet does something completely different and is so perfectly evocative of the decade in which it was made. But it's a different movie. The remakes I like the least are ones that I call like karaoke, where it's like, this is a famous film, let's just run through the same beats.
Yeah.
Sometimes the same lines, not mentioning any names. But that's the thing that always pisses me off. Don't just say the line from the first one. Come on. The 1987 film is very much its own thing. And weirdly, that film is influential in a different way because I think it seemed to directly inspire the real TV show American Gladiators by having these larger than life stalkers. Right. But it was never a question to do that because the premise of our adaptation is similar to the book where Ben Richards is out in the wilds and the hunters who are after him, with the exception of McCone, who's the Lee Pace character who's in a mask the entire time, they're supposed to be masters. You're supposed to not spot these guys until they're right upon you. If you're like suddenly one of the hunters is standing right in front of you, it means you're about to die. So the other hunters are like masters of disguise throughout the movie and are being stealth. I mean, I remember when I reading the book, what it really reminded me of and what Evan McCone reminded me of was the Super Posse in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Super Posse who are always coming and you can't seem to outrun them. And the main guy has a white hat. And that's the thing that's kind of coming. That's the signal that death is near. And there was something of that in the sort of what we talked about in the adaptation. So it was never the question. I'd also say, if I say one thing about the Arnold Schwarzenegger film, is when you have a scene where it's like, who will win between Arnold Schwarzenegger and this obese opera singer? I wonder.
Yeah, exactly. And also he has Christmas lights practically on him. Like there's no sneaking up with that guy singing opera.
No, the Christmas lights is not good for stealth.
No, it's not. Speaking of the villains, the ultimate villain of the movie and the book is really Killian. It was amazing casting in the original movie with Richard Dawson. And I absolutely love what you guys did for Josh Brolin's character here. But I'm curious, was there ever a moment in your casting where you thought, what if we took real reality TV hosts like Jeff Probst of Survivor or Phil Kogan of The Amazing Race and put them in there as like a Killian, kind of as a nod to that? Or was it always going to be like a serious actor like Brolin?
Well, two things. It's like, number one, I think the masterstroke of the 1987 film is Richard Dawson. And we talked about that in terms of real quiz show host, but more for the Bobby T character. But ultimately, we felt like they already aced that thing. Now you're just copying them if you do a real life quiz show host. But also the crucial thing that is like the book is Killian. In the 1987 film, they amalgamate Killian and Bobby T into the same character. We wanted to split that up. So Josh is the sort of the C-suite character, Dan Killian, the producer of the show, exactly like the book. And Bobby Thompson is the host of the show, who's like the ringmaster. And so that was the thing. The guy behind the scenes that's the sort of Machiavellian reality show producer, and Coleman is the host of the show. And that's in the book. And we think, well, let's do that. And then in terms of getting an actor like Coleman Domingo to play that part, he's just going to come in and tear the roof off the studio.
Also, Killian as an executive, right? Nemesis is very prescient of Stephen King and very current, unfortunately, as we're having an underclass that you see in Stephen King's book, and people are feeling this tension. The book couldn't be more prescient, and I thought your writing of Killian's character, which is very expanded compared to the 87 film, but also really from the book to an extent as well, was really well done, in which he is a manipulator. He is the person that is controlling the images people see, which harkens back to 1984 of all things. What was important for you guys to express through writing Killian's character?
I think we hit a point fairly quickly with Killian where we realized it'd be more entertaining and in a way more real to have an executive who was less about coercion than seduction, and kind of getting Ben to join on through flattery with plenty of coercion thrown in, but always with a smile, never raising his voice. Slick. And once we had that, it all kind of came together from there.
The most sort of mercenary, ruthless people in entertainment, or business for that matter, full stop, wield soft power. And so there's this thing in writing that character, but also getting Josh Brolin to play it, is that it's always with a smile. He never has to show his teeth. Usually in those situations, when there's bad news or something something bad's going to happen, like an underling will tell you this thing. So it's a great thing to have the antagonist act nearly the whole movie like he's your best friend. And even when he's kind of angry with Ben, usually the message behind what he's saying is like, why don't you want to make money? What's wrong with you? He's a complete sociopath, so he doesn't understand that Ben is not willing to literally have to break bodies to get there and kill people. He's sort of up against somebody who just has more of a backbone than he does.
I want to dive into the writing, and I know this is going far back, and I interviewed both of you guys for it, but your script of Scott Pilgrim, what was something you learned about each other's creative habits that came in handy having that previous experience when you sat down to write here? And I want to discuss how you work as co-writers.
I think we learned we're both a bit obsessive and detail-oriented. I stay up later. Actor's more familiar with the morning light.
That's great when I'm in London and he's in LA because we're on the same time zone. Timeline, rather.
True.
Well, so wait, Michael, you're a night writer. Edgar, are you a night writer, or do you like to write during the day?
No, I can't do it.
I've always been like that. Even for school assignments, I procrastinate till the very last minute and then stay up until I had to leave for class.
I'm with you. Night writing is great because there's no one that could bug you. You're not going to get interrupted or distracted. I'm curious, though, to the art of adaptation. And Scott Pilgrim, as we know, is a great adaptation as well. There's this whole dilemma that writers have when you want to do something reverent is you want to stay faithful to the source material, but it's also vital that you invent. So what could you tell us about that kind of pendulum going back and forth and knowing when to invent something to make this your own and to make it, in your case, you're also modernizing?
The book is really great. And even though it's a slim book, there's a great amount of world building aside from the story. It's kind of incredibly dense in detail. It's such a gift of a sort of source material to work upon. I think it was just a nature of expansion in places and some sort of changes, but also to try and be as faithful as possible. I mean, it's funny you say about the modernizing, because one of the decisions that we made pretty early on was to keep most of the analog technology from the book, which published in 82 but written in 1973. And some of the stuff in it is like way ahead, like the idea of like the sort of drones. A key thing that's in the book, which we take the ball and run with it, obviously, is a scene where he makes tape and then they've manipulated his words when it goes out on TV to say something different. I think the thing is we wanted to be faithful to the novel because the 87 book had not been, and the book very much has its fans. So it was really important to us. Is like, we want to bring the Ben Richards that's in the book to the screen.
The analog was so funny in the film. You have drone cameras flying around with people recording them, but he's going to post office boxes to mail a tape rather than upload it. So you really nailed it with the analog kind of feeling, which was really wild.
I'll say the least controversial thing ever on this podcast that every writer will agree with. Smartphones are the death of the thriller.
Absolutely.
So boring on screen and in the script. Like, they're just like not cinematic because we've had these fucking things for 20 years now. They're not conducive to great cinema. So like,
it's definitely something you consciously think about working on something like this. All right, what do we do about the fucking phones? But it fits in nicely with the world where the wealth gap is so large that most people can't afford the latest and greatest technology. And it leaves a security gap for the regime because they can't track analog technology. Staying spoiler free, that's all I'll say about it for the moment. But we also wanted to figure out how to keep the FreeV as the kind of central messaging device of the network and not have the show being experienced through push updates, that kind of thing.
And you are the guy that says, hey, you're on FreeV. So you got your SAG card active in this film as well, Michael. For anybody that doesn't know, that's Michael. And you can see him in the trailer without even seeing the movie, but you got to go see the movie.
Stephen King, who obviously had an input both with the screenplay and the finished film, and was so complimentary about both, and wrote Michael a really nice email about the screenplay. And then separately from that later, he said, because I really like the line, like, hey, you're on FreeV. And I said, that's Michael saying that line. I had to point out to Stephen King that it was you saying that line. So now he knows what you look like as well.
How long was your outlining process? Because you have this gift of the book, so you're outlining from the spine of pre-existing material. But how long did you spend outlining together before you started writing?
It was a while, wasn't it? Because I think actually, you maybe have a better memory of the timeline than me, but I know that the outline was actually longer than the studio needed, and we had to edit the treatment.
Yeah, I think it was really trying to prepare as much as possible for going into the draft. And because there's so much great stuff in the book, I I think it was a process of, well, let's start with that and see how much of that we could just do. And then slowly kind of sculpting and carving and trying to get it into a place where jumping into the draft, you've kind of got your foundation.
When you're co-writing, are you sending drafts back and forth, or are you hopping on the phone or Zoom, or are you writing together, which you can also do these days?
What happened was we wrote the treatment together, I think sort of remotely most of the time. We'd been together a little bit. Michael wrote the first two drafts. I thought I was going to go off and do another movie, and then 2023 happened and the writers and actors strikes, and that movie didn't happen. And so we didn't start kind of working in a room together until early last year. It's sort of wild that I will say as well, it's funny you were saying about us both being obsessive and stuff, is that we kept on writing all the way through the edit as well. I don't think either of us have ever worked on something as intensely.
Final draft of the script.
Final draft of the script is the edit. But in this case, it really was because there was so much we could do. There's so much voiceover and commentary and other things going on, and just even tannoy announcements, PA announcements and things. At first, it was like working on the treatment, and then Michael wrote the first two drafts. There was the production strikes and the writer strike in the middle of that. And we didn't really start getting in a room together because Paramount kind of fired the starting gun. There was a point in early 2024, last year, where Mike Ireland, the then head of Paramount Pictures, said, "Why aren't we making The Running Man?" He said, "We could be in production by the end of the year and have it out in late 2025, which most projects you're pushing uphill. Now, not to say that the production was easy. It's a very complicated thing to mount, but it was actually great having that real go. And I came back to LA, and then we literally sat in the room for hours, not just working on the script, but I do want to stress this also. If we had what I would call creative procrastination, I wouldn't even call it creative procrastination, research. The fun part of that is watching some very weird game shows, which will mean nothing to your American listeners. There were some British game shows that were sort of weirdly kind of quite on the nose for what we were doing.
It starts to become about, for Edgar, how can I actually do this? He needs to be able to see how he's going to shoot something and actually bring it to the screen. So the shit gets real. It is rare to have something kind of kick off like that. That was a great process, just flipping through it and really getting into the nitty gritty.
And it's a really ambitious script as well. So to be able to we're working on it and then in tandem with some production elements, because the toughest thing about this movie was bringing to the screen the thing that's missing from the previous one. The thing that we really wanted to do was not just him going out into the world and keeping his perspective. So the gameplay is 30 days out anywhere. You leave the network building and then it's up to you where you go. It could be hide and seek on a national, if not global level, if you can get out of the country. That's ambitious. Then the other ambitious part of it is all of you see the world through the TV, the freebie. So you see what's on the show, you see what's happened to the other contestants, you see adverts for the show, you see other game shows, you see other reality shows. So that world,
Americanos,
it's super dense, and we have to come up with all that stuff as well. The thing is, only you, both of us, we set the ambition level. Nobody's asking us for it to be this complicated. So you can't stand there on set in a night shoot in Glasgow, cursing the heavens, going, "Whose idea was this?" Because then it's it's our idea. It's our fault.
Ooh, hey, I'm jumping in really quick to remind you to check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You could read us there on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. It is our 13th year of publishing, as I'm in my 20th year of podcasting, and we are having a blast. We're continuing to add new articles to our magazine because we're a digital magazine. We can do that. We're also still putting articles on our blog at our website for everyone to read for free. And look, if you've never read us before, I hope you test drive us by checking out our free issue. And if you like what you see, and I hope that you do, you could use discount coupon code SAVE5 to save $5 off a 1-year subscription. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see all these Zoom chats take place. It would really mean a lot to me to have you support my passion project and support independent entertainment journalism. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right back into our interview with co-writer-director Edgar Wright and co-writer Michael Bacall about their latest film, The Running Man in theaters this week. It's interesting because you have so much detail that I'm curious how long your drafts were, because it requires a lot of description because you're world building in a sense. And obviously you get the benefit of being the co-writer and director. So you know what you need on the page. But how many pages were you guys talking, ranging from your first draft to your production draft?
All screenwriters will know this one. The trick is to make sure that this draft that the studio see is 120 pages or less. And there's like a B dialogue. There's all the other stuff, which is like so the Americano is in full, is not in the main script. You do stuff, there's the treatment, and then there's just a lot of other stuff. Like I would sort of do production notes for people, because obviously if you wrote every single thing that's on screen and every single thing that's heard,
right,
like a continuity draft that's like 200 pages long, but you need it to be a read that for actors and for the studio that's kind of like an easy read, and it's like closer to the running time. But I mean, Michael can attest this. There's a lot of B dialogue.
Yeah, I think the two longest documents would probably be first draft when I first give it to Edgar, and continuity drafts at the very end, because the first draft before we give it to the studio, it's going to be longer because I want him to be able to see maximum detail and kind of pick out what's most important to him and then kind of hone in on that. And then as we kind of move on, I think it's a process of stripping it down to the bare essentials for the experience of the read, and then keeping a whole shitload of separate documents for just like the Americanos.
Yeah, like the Americanos, like a whole other document, which again was then just almost like a jumping off point for the actors, because Debbie Mazar, Kat Cohen, and Emma Sidia all just like improvise like demons, and quite a lot of the improvised lines are the bits that are in the film.
You also have your previs stage where you're working out your fights and all the details of your action, and that would be added description to a screenplay. So it's good that you're able to kind of keep previs in your head as a separate document, because otherwise that would increase your page count as well.
It's also, I'm not a big fan of, like, if I get sent a screenplay that has a lot of really descriptive action in it, I just tune out.
Really?
You gotta, like, Walter Hill was the daddy of like writing action on the page, because he writes it like haikus, and you get the gist, and it's exciting, but it's fast. It's as fast to read as it is to watch.
You read it like you see it.
Read it like you see it. And that's a real art. And Walter Hill was the king of it. Also, James Cameron is really good at writing like that. So is Shane Black. So is Quentin Tarantino. When you get sent a screenplay and there's like a solid paragraph of fighting, you know that everybody's going to skip that. Like, so actually you end up honing it down. And then, yes, you draw storyboards, and then the storyboards become the animatics, and then the stunt team get involved. To just say how much writing there is on this. It's like, say you've got the speed the wheel scene. There's the game show with Sean Hayes that's at the start. So there's the key lines, and what would be in the draft. But then in the scene, the TV doesn't get turned off. It's still on whilst Glenn is talking to Jamie Lawson, his wife, Ben and Sheila. And that game show is in the background. So we have to write like a whole other round with another contestant that you don't see. And Sean Hayes and this other actor sort of performed it almost like a radio play. And it's in the background, the whole thing. So it's just like that level of detail beyond. Or another good example of something that expanded in the edit was on the page when Bobby T was doing commentary during a potential kill. As in, say the scene where like Ben is being hunted down in the YVA, the halfway house he's in. In the script are just a couple of lines to establish that the TVs are on and Bobby T is commentating. Now, of course, as soon as you get into the edit, you're like, hey, we maybe we need to write some more stuff for this, because the TV isn't switching off. It's there. And that's a gift. That's a gift, because you got Coleman and you can write new dialogue. But the script that kind of gets greenlit is the sort of the leanest, best read. And then for production and for the actors, and for the edit, there's like a whole lot of other stuff.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention politics. The cover of the 1982 book has the tagline, "Welcome to America in 2025. When the best men don't run for president, they run for their lives." Aside from kudos to you for bringing this out in 2025, the year of the book, politics is a very important thing to Stephen King publicly. And you did the magic trick of writing and directing an entertaining film that gives you the privilege of inserting some politics into to make your audience think a bit. And I'm curious how conscious of that you were when you guys were writing your draft.
I think we were conscious about not or coming off as partisan in any way. The politics are class politics, really. And I think it kind of speaks for itself on that count. I think we were not looking to do any preaching, put the entertainment first and foremost. And the gift of the book is how prescient it was in terms of all the sociocultural movements in the country and the world to a large degree, particularly with the idea of truth being a real thing that's important. And our antagonist, for him, truth is just a product to be manipulated. So I think those were the most important things for us in that regard.
There's only like 2 mentions of the government in the film. Bradley mentions that the network owned the government, and then there's a passing mention of the president of the United States by Josh's character, but in the context of a photo op. We had 2 test screenings in America, and the message of the movie seemed to just score a bullseye for everybody. Like, it didn't seem to kind of be divisive in any way, and I think that's what Michael said is like the ultimate kind of goal for the heroes is the truth, which I think everybody can agree on, even if they pretend like they don't. Hopefully the magic trick is that everybody can enjoy it. Like sometimes you get genre films that are like Trojan horses that are, you're using the genre that you have to smuggle in a lot of other stuff. But I think here the movie is the message. It's an interesting thing just in terms of Stephen King as a writer and being like a Nostradamus. This goes with the best of genre, that it holds up like a funhouse mirror to reality. And, you know, maybe there are elements of this movie where the fiction part of the science fiction is getting fainter. But if it works as an entertaining action sci-fi thriller that gives you something to chew on, then great. Like it's a win-win for us.
It's baked in because Ben is an everyman and everybody's watching it. And the previous episodes of Running Man are people getting killed, but they start realizing, what if we root for this guy? Because maybe we like him and maybe we realize that we've been manipulated. So it makes sense. You know, Stephen King's written a lot of horror. Was it horrifying to get notes from Stephen King? What kind of script notes did he give when he read it?
Number one is that I had been in email correspondence with him for a number of years because he'd always been very generous in his praise for my movies, way back to Shaun of the Dead. He wrote a press quote. I'd never met the guy. I didn't have his contacts, but he wrote us a pull quote for Shaun of the Dead, which was just amazing. And I remember me and Simon, when we saw that, I think we sat in silence for several minutes, just taking it in that Stephen King would give us a pull quote. More recently, after Baby Driver, we'd actually started emailing each other because he'd been so kind about Baby Driver and Soho, and mostly talking about music. And the thing is this, Stephen King is like a producer on this and is obviously aware of all of the films of his that are being made and has screenplay sign off and some casting sign off on some of the bigger parts. Now, I didn't email him about doing this. He would have been well aware through his agent that we were working on it. I didn't email him until quite late in the day. It was like if things started to really roll at the start of 24. I don't think it was probably until the summer, MB, that like we actually sent it to him. And the reason I didn't send it to him until late, even though I had his email and we were in contact, was I didn't want to be the boy who cried wolf. And the idea of getting in touch with him about the movie and then it falling apart, as movies can do, as you might be aware. I just thought like it'd be too heartbreaking for me to be in contact with him about this adaptation of a book that I've loved since I was a teenager. So very late in the day, we sent him the screenplay. And Stephen King used to be an English teacher, so he's kind of like the most famous English teacher in the world. And we were just having a sweaty weekend waiting for Stephen King to read our homework. And the thing happened first is he sort of read it and he would respond to it scene by scene.
Oh, wow.
And sort of like screen cap parts of it and say, yes, that's it. Love it. And then the next thing would be another thing. He goes, yes, you got it. And then there was one line and one line only. He screen capped it and I sent it to MB and he goes, don't hit them over the head with it. That was the one that was like a line that he thought was too on the nose. I will say that line is not in the movie.
Well, since it's not in the movie, could you tell us what it is?
No, I don't want to say. But it's in the deleted scenes, actually. The line, I think we did shoot, we cut it out of the movie because he was right.
So really only one big note.
Well, I actually sort of remember saying to Michael, I said, my heart can't take it. And luckily then he just read the whole thing. And he loved it. And he loved the things that we kept. He loved the things that we changed. He was very very kind of appreciative of what we did with the ending and thought it was great. So that was huge for us. But the only thing when I say it's a blessing and a curse is that when you're making a movie, you sort of have to live up to the movie that's in your head, or even just from the sort of like I said, Michael's first draft is great and like, but really ambitious enough that I sometimes would think, well, this is never going to get made. It's like, it's too big, it's too crazy. And then here we are with a finished movie, which is amazing. And I'm forever grateful. But when you're making a movie, you're trying to live up to the movie that's in your head. And now, because Stephen King liked the screenplay, I'm having to live up to the movie that's in his head as well. So then you're adding, there's already a lot of pressure making a movie, but now there's this pressure of not letting Stephen King down. I mean, I don't know, Michael, did you feel the same way?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was a suspenseful couple days there.
I wasn't expecting the screen caps of the final draft pages. That was like, oh my God, wow. Okay. He loves it.
I mean, that must have been stressful. I'm glad luckily he had almost no notes for you guys, because that probably was a relief. So that was fantastic.
Similar thing is that the next thing is he watched the nearly finished film after the second test screening. And I've been emailing with him for years, and I knew he was watching it. We'd arranged for him to see it after the second test screening when we were getting closer to locking. And I sent him an email saying, hey, I understand you're watching the movie today. I really, really hope you enjoy it. Call me afterwards. Like, I just left my number because I realized I'd never spoken to him before. Maybe because I'm too nervous. I'm such a big fan. So the first time we spoke was just after he watched it.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Was there any reshoots? It's a part of like the last part of your process. As you said, writing all the way through editing, you have all these ADR possibilities to add dialogue in the background. Yeah. Were there any reshoots? Because reshoots are really crucial to a lot of films, because you could see a rough cut and you know exactly what you need now.
There's a funny thing I think in kind of that on the internet, especially with the trade websites, is reshoots is always brought up like it's a dirty word. Oh, so this film's going into reshoots. What we call it is additional filming. And the truth is, if it's going your way, or even if it isn't, additional filming is like it can be like the save, because it's something, or it'd be just something where it's like, we could improve this scene with one shot. We could improve this scene with one line. We want to add to this. I think that often like reshoots is kind of a dirty word, when in truth, it is like another great part of the process. And if you have the support of the studio and you can get the people back together, I mean, the stuff that we did is very, very surgical and stuff that we wanted to do. And also we had Glenn went straight on to another movie after he finished with us. We finished at the end of March. We didn't start editing this movie properly. Obviously, we're editing through the shoot, but proper start of the editing was April. So we spent the whole of this spring and summer editing the movie. By the time we were coming up to the second preview, Glenn was available again because he'd finished JJ's movie and he was available for like 3-4 days at the end of August. So, but by this time we're ready and we know what we're doing. But I mean, Michael, the additional, it's
an opportunity. By that part of the process for us, and on this project, we felt pretty clear about what we needed, and it wasn't anything big or structural. It was very surgical. Most of it was within scenes that were already in the movie, seamlessly kind of integrated, which is incredible. It's hard to tell. In particular, for this one, it was pretty exciting. We're going to get the chance to make this even better. And you just have to be really clear on what you're doing ahead of time, because the time and money is limited, and you just want to get everything you can to improve the film. I think we could kind of barely squeeze it in there.
It's amazing. When it works, it's just like a joy. And also, we had a great partner on this in Glenn. He's a writer as well. So having somebody that's an actor and also a writer is huge.
Fantastic.
Really understands the process. I know this sounds like stating up the obvious, but he'll work as hard on it as we need him to, which is amazing. And to have that access to him, even when he was like just like doing little ADR things on his iPhone, and we'd put it straight into the edit and it would work.
The trades had it wrong a long time ago, because additional photography is crucial, and smart producers actually pad their budget and use it as a line item, because it's something that could really be the icing on the cake for a movie. And just to remind our listeners, you're talking about August of 2025.
Yeah.
2.5 months ago, you were doing some additional photography. That does not mean a film is in trouble. It means it's getting the proper attention that it deserves.
I had an out-of-body experience when I was doing the junket stuff in LA last week. I was looking at like the poster for our film in between interviews, and I was thinking, oh yeah, we made this. This is a film that exists. This whole process has been both the best and the hardest. Hardest just in terms of like to hit that release date and make the movie, which as you've seen the movie, it's not an uncomplicated movie.
No, I think 170 locations. You filmed from October, I think, through March, October of 24 to March of 25.
It was like the start of November until the end of March. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a very complicated movie. And because, to your credit, so much of it was practical, you didn't have to wait on so many things to come back, yet you have digital elements for sure that are, again, polishing your practical elements rather than vice versa.
the key to getting through that as well, this is like more of a VFX podcast than a writing podcast. But the key there, again, regular collaborators. Michael is just one of the people who worked on Scott Pilgrim, who worked on this, or worked on my other movies, and one of them was Andrew Whitehurst, our VFX supervisor, worked on Scott Pilgrim. First time it's ILM. But one of the things that you do during the shoot to get ahead, knowing that we got release date, is like pick your hero shots, what is your favorite take, and do that stuff ahead of time. So when you're in the edit, you're not necessarily starting the edit with scene one. You're getting through the big set pieces so you can hand it over to the machine and everybody can do everything they need to do. Because it's funny, two different directors who've watched the film, Mark Romanek and Chris McQuarrie, both said the same thing first. And as soon as they said it, I got a shiver of PTSD. They said, the TV graphics alone. It's so complicated. And I said, oh yeah, no, it really is. Just the fact you said that kind of started to bring me out in hives, but it looks amazing, but it's a lot of work.
Well, going back to the writing, Michael, starting with you, and then of course, same question for Edgar, but you could also add something else as a director. What was your toughest scene? Michael, what was the scene as a writer that you kept coming back to on the page over and over? And tell us about the light bulb moment when you found a creative solution.
That's an easy one, but I can't talk about it specifically without spoilers. Let's say it's towards the end of the movie and there's some complicated story bits in that location, and I was just banging my head against the wall, talking to Edgar about it. It was just one of those things that was way too complicated, and as often happens, it was just a search for a simpler way to kind of enhance the drama of that scene. Kind of a rules thing, almost like a technical thing that was just getting in the way. There was just a moment after we'd gone kind of back and forth on it, and I'd tried really just bunching down what was there to make it as short as possible. But there was a moment where something clicked, and I remembered, oh, we can kind of make up the rules for this game. And that became very handy. And I think it works really well in the film to kind of set up what happens in the end. That was by far the most difficult part of the writing for me.
Edgar, same question to you. And if there's something you want to reference from the trailer, which everybody's seen, that's fine to tag it if you can as well.
I don't think it's spoiling anything. I think the opening scenes were some of the toughest.
Okay.
Just as a sort of like balance and modulation and length. Very early on, the idea that we talked about was having the opening scenes being quite claustrophobic. You're mostly in windowless rooms. The idea is when you get to the opening credits, which is about kind of 8 minutes in, the world just expands hugely and you kind of get like a massive hit of world building in the opening credits as Ben Richards walks from his kind of downtown cooperative apartment block to the network building and sort of walks the length of the city, and you see kind of the wealth gap and you see like what downtown is like, and you go through the border to uptown. And prior to that is all of the setup, and it is by design kind of like the darker moments, literally and figuratively, and setting up his situation with his family and how desperate they are. And that is also sort of a script writing stage and getting studio notes, just sort of making it true to the book but without being kind of like so desperate it's off-putting. And that was everything through performance and even through some additional, but like just in terms of just modulating what it is and getting it to the point where everybody feels like you set it up emotionally. And that's key. And test screenings tell you a lot as well. The scene that opens the movie was only talked about in dialogue. And it was actually Simon Kinberg that suggested to us, what if you saw that scene? We were starting like the book. It was a great note. And it was sort of like a great scene to write. And it came very quickly. And the scene that's in the movie is very similar to what,
Yeah, I think we probably worked on that apartment scene more than any scene in terms of writing.
Yeah.
More than any scene in the movie.
Obviously, that was on the page, Edgar. As a director, do you remember was being your toughest scene?
Same scene, the opening scene. Real babies. Acting with real 2-year-olds who are great. And it cuts together brilliantly. But I will say this is like Glenn Powell has so much patience as an actor to work with crying babies and try and get all of his dialogue out. So the scene with David Zayas and Glenn, and then the following scene with Jamie Lawson and Glenn, and two, we had, have twins and you swap them out, but we had real 2-year-olds. And it cuts together fantastic, but it's definitely one of the hardest scenes to shoot.
And we started with that.
And we started with it. It was literally the first thing that we shot. I was always a big believer in starting with something really tough, and that was tough.
Well, look, I absolutely loved the book, the previous movie, and now your film. And I hope everybody goes and sees this because there's going to be a lot of cool conversations for film lovers around the world to have about this. Congrats on a job well done. Edgar, Michael, it was great chatting with you again.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to co-writer-director Edgar Wright and co-writer Michael Bacall for being so generous with their time and coming down to chat about their latest film, The Running Man, in theaters this week. And while you're surfing around online, I hope you also check out Backstory Magazine on a desktop or laptop over at backstory.net or via our iPad app, Backstory. If you've never read us before, you could test drive us by reading our free issue. And if you like what you see, and I hope that you do, you could use discount coupon code SAVE5 to save $5 off a 1-year subscription. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see all these Zoomcasts. That's right, you could see us chatting on Zoom. It would really mean a lot to me to have you consider supporting my passion project and, of course, independent entertainment journalism by becoming a subscriber. So thanks for considering. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2025. All rights reserved. And folks, if you want to drop me a line, I'm pretty easy to find. You could find me on social media, on Blue Sky as Yo Goldsmith, and on Twitter, also X, as Yo Goldsmith or Backstory_mag. Same thing goes on Instagram as Yo Goldsmith or Backstory_mag. Hey, I even have a Facebook fan page where you could reach out to me there. Or if you want to go old school, you could email me backstoryletters@gmail.com, and I will do my darndest to respond to you. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.